Today we will be working on this beautiful owl from Titan Forge. My goal was to use a balanced mix of warm and cool colors, with a strong emphasis on earth tones and vibrant hues for contrast. This diverse palette allows for rich, dynamic and visually engaging miniatures, with the ability to create both subtle blends and striking contrast. So grab your paints, brushes, and let's start. I started as usual with a pre-highlight over a black primer. I left the cape without pre-highlighting at this point because I will use it as my grip during the painting process. In most cases, when I start painting, I try to paint inside out, which is why I started with the white fur of the owl. Generally, it's the same approach as on my weasel that I painted a while ago. You can check the detailed tutorial at the link that will appear now on the screen. In this case, I did not use oil paint. Instead, I used Pallid Bone. This will give me the same effect as the oil wash. The rest of the fur was done as on my weasel. Because the owl is holding a wand, I needed to paint his robes now, as they are the most hidden element of the miniature. I will catch up on highlights and weathering later on, and only on the visible elements. If you want to highlight elements that are not visible, you can do it. But why? In the end, the robe will disappear behind the wand. The next hidden element are the robes. The main color is just a random dark brown that I found on my shelf, and the highlights I painted with an ochre brown color, which will be a perfect fit on our yellowish green robe. To achieve a strong contrast on the owl's body, I used Tyrian Navy as the base color for his legs and arms. If you decide to paint this mini, you need to be careful with this paint. This is a very dark color, and if you apply a too thick layer, it can be mistaken for black. All highlights and edges on the arms and legs were painted with a grayish blue color. For the blade, I diluted Caribbean Ocean a lot to achieve a smooth blend. If you are not sure whether you will achieve a smooth blend or not, always paint towards the shadows. This way the paint will not accumulate in places where light reflections should be placed. If you are not quite happy with the light reflections, you can always smooth your blends with an airbrush. A little bit of white ink will do the trick and correct your blends. Time to fix the cape. I made up the highlights with the white ink and started to apply my colors with wet blending. It was very helpful at this point to prepare two different brushes in order to benefit from the wet paint. I did not focus too much on this stage because I knew that I would later improve the blends with the airbrush. This stage only serves to check whether I really like the choice of colors and what point I should add green to orange. But if you like the wet blending effect, you can leave the airbrush out. When fixing blends on small elements, it is always very helpful to mix your colors with some thinner. I could have also used my speed paints for fixing the blends, but I wanted to add some additional colors to my cape. I nearly forgot the skulls on top of the cape. After my base color was dried, I highlighted the skulls with Vallejo Bone White and moved on to some gold elements. For all gold elements, I used the same combination as in my last couple of recordings. The only thing I changed is the company. I replaced Vallejo with Army Painter. The colors are so similar that it doesn't really matter which one you use. Both are perfect. At the top of the screen you saw the Army Painter colors that I used this time. And now a short recap of the painted gold elements. When it comes to the coat, I did not want to just paint each feather in different colors from the beginning on. I also wanted to add an element of magic, with a shimmering effect on the feathers and their elements, so that it would seem that the coat had some energy. For this purpose, I used very bright colors to paint the edges and some feather elements, adding very random effect. That's why I wasn't very precise, and I tried to make it all look very random and maybe a little sloppy. I think in the end it turned out very good. I was not very happy with the orange fire highlights and weathering, so I added some yellow to my orange and applied an additional layer of highlights. The elements that I accented with the mix were the most raised parts of the feathers. The wand and the trunk I covered with snakebite leather. After my brown was dry, I wanted to mark the edges of the wood to make them really stand out. In most cases, you have these elements carved out, so all you need to do is to dilute your paint and follow the edges. I also did not want to mark all the edges, but only those where the light falls. I know it will look weird at this point, but we will get to it in a moment. To prevent our wood from being too dark, I thinned snakebite leather very heavily with a thinner to the consistency of a filter. Then I painted all the wooden elements. This way I obtained interesting highlights that stand out enough from the background of the entire miniature. I did not want to paint stripes on his wand just in one color. I wanted to introduce a few colors to make this element look interesting. For this purpose, I used strong contrast to create an interesting highlight. As in the case of the coat, I wanted these highlights to be very random. For the base, I broke some cork elements and arranged them in an interesting pattern. I also wanted my owl to stand a little higher, so I glued a few stones and painted the whole thing black. As soon as the paint dried, I dry brushed the whole base to mark the edges and give an interesting shade to the whole base. I thinned the brown a lot and applied it to the entire base, added tufts of grass and glued my owl. Since we are probably in a magical forest, I wanted to add an interesting glow coming from the mushrooms that are a part of the miniature. After applying the base colors, I used an airbrush to paint some pre-highlights. In this case, I paid attention to where the glow could fall and which of the surrounding elements I should also pre-highlight. After drying, I painted the pre-highlighted elements with very intense colors, so that the two small mushrooms stood out strong against the background of the entire miniature, adding an additional magical touch to the entire scenery. If you like this one, do not forget to like the recording, subscribe to the channel, comment down below, and I will catch you the next time. Bye bye!